My name is Chris Messina. I work for myself with my partner Tara for a company called Citizen Agency. And I've been involved in open source and open standards projects for a little while now. And a lot of it has to do with the social web, something which you might call either the social graph or social networking or whatever. Basically, it's people using the internet to do social things. And a project I've been involved in recently, since December, I guess, is a project called DSO. Which is short form for distributed social networking. The idea is that now that we have building blocks like OpenID for identity and OAuth for authorization of permissions and things like that, and microformats for representing parts of people's profiles, we can start to build things like Facebook or MySpace in a way that no longer is simply controlled by one entity. It can actually be controlled by individuals. And the idea, the long-term goal of this is to provide a kind of answer to, or an independent alternative to, I guess, sort of silo living or high-rise living, as I'm starting to call it, to a more village-like model where individuals and independents and small businesses can kind of flourish talking to one another on a human scale. And that ideally that'll lead to a lot of innovation in the social networking space. Providing sort of economic incentives for people to have control over their data and to be able to choose with whom they do business or with whom they interact. So we're just getting started. It's primarily myself and this guy Steve Ivey working on this project. There's some other really interesting people who have gotten involved lately, and we'd like to have something by South by Southwest maybe in March that we can actually show off and sort of demonstrate this stuff. We are starting with WordPress as our platform of choice because it's open source and because Will Norris gave us a great OpenID plugin, and because a lot of people have it and are good at hacking on WordPress. So, we're kind of starting with a pretty pragmatic approach, seeing where it takes us, and hopefully providing some implementations of ideas that we've seen that we like elsewhere in other big social networks, but that really, if they belong to us, could enable a lot of really interesting things from an independent open source community. I guess what I'd like to see in terms of a lot of the consulting that I do and that we do for Citizen Agency with companies is that we find that a lot of companies end up spending a lot of time focused so much on account management, on users either forgetting their passwords or recreating, or finding their friends again over and over and over again. And what we'd like to be able to do is to enable, especially small companies, small businesses, companies that we've used, for example, like BlinkSale, or even Basecamp and things like that, or more social applications like Icon Buffet, to be able to focus less on recreating your account and your profile all the time, but allowing you to manage that in one place, in a place that makes sense to you. And when you go to these sites, you just start using them. So they focus more on innovating their services, the services that they're offering, as opposed to all the account management nonsense. I kind of like to, I guess I will use the analogy, but the way it is now, when you go to a new network or a new social site, you typically, it's kind of like going to a restaurant and having to sign up for their credit card in order to pay them. It kind of doesn't really make sense, and you end up with all these different credit cards, and it's very confusing. What happens if you lose one, and you go back to the site, and it's kind of a nightmare. What ideally we should be able to do on the web, like we can do in the real world, is kind of like when you go to a restaurant, you choose whatever form of payment you want to use. A credit card, you might have a couple credit cards or whatever. You choose the right one for the right purpose. And the same thing should be true for identity. So if you show up someplace and you want to pull out kind of your professional identity, you should be able to do that. And you should be able to maintain that someplace else so that you can go to lots and lots of different sites that are supporting your professional networking or your professional life, and they kind of allow you to maintain your own independent identity. Same thing's true for social sites. So if you have a site where you go and plan events and so forth, why do you have to recreate your friends list, to use yet a new site that's offering some new functionality? So ultimately with DSO, what we'd like to be able to do is to enable companies to really focus on creating great services for individuals to maintain their profiles and their friends lists. When they show up to a new site, to be able to just log in and start using the functionality, and then to sort of like a distributed or independently or individually owned beacon service. Beacon was pretty controversial with Facebook because Facebook controlled all that data and all the relationships. The idea in this case is that through your either identity provider or data broker or something that you control, you're sending back all the actions that you take on the web back to some sort of source where you're able to watch and monitor kind of your own behaviors and share that information again. So for example, if you go to Amazon and you buy a book, it's great that Amazon will maintain that information, but wouldn't it be great also if you could sort of publish that back automatically to your own personal profile? And then managing your own personal profile, you could choose which of your friends you'd like to reveal that information to on a very granular level. And rather than just sort of taking for granted whatever the large social networks say you can and can't do with your data, the DISO model allows you to have complete and utter control, which again, hopefully will lead to people kind of innovating on those ideas and being able to see across a much wider and more personal social graph what kind of things are going on that are interesting and sort of what we call accelerating serendipity. I guess I also see it like where we're moving, it's getting harder and harder, I think, to build a social site that's compelling and that attracts a number of people that can sustain the site either through advertising or through, I mean, small amounts of capital or VC or whatever, because so many of the users are already in these larger, again, high rises. So how do you, if you have a really innovative idea, bootstrap something, you know? And the hope is that, well, if individuals are able to sort of pick and choose and be in control of their data, and then if you're providing a really great service to patronize you with either their data or more access to information that they have about themselves or about other information or whatever it is, that you can actually build a relationship. One of the things actually that I'd like to point out, I think, is a distinction between users and customers. There's kind of confusion right now where the more users you have, the more sort of like captive email addresses you have in your database, the higher your evaluation should be. And it's a little bit absurd because you can't actually run a business without any income. And so to have income in a business, you actually need to have customers. Customers are people with whom you have sort of a professional business relationship with. So what I would like to see as well, you know, talking about my previous point, is a move and a shift towards understanding individuals as your customers as opposed to just users that you aggregate over and over again. And then when you hit the 50 million mark, somehow that's success. You know, I'd rather probably have, you know, 50 awesome customers that are going to enable me to sort of continue my business because I've developed a relationship with them and I know who they are because they're able to share their identity with me, than having, I guess, such a mass of customers that don't care about me, and when I send emails to them, they mark it as spam. I'm doing this just because I'm interested in demonstrating the idea. You know, I don't know what the long-term business looks like, if there is any business in it, but I feel like it's something that's necessary for the web, that getting to a point where we can take identity for granted as a building block of the web is an important place to go. I mean, this is stuff that I felt was really important with Flock that I didn't really finish while I was there. So moving forward with this, I do want to get to the point where people can have a great deal of choice and sort of liberty and freedom of mobility, and not feel like, well, all my friends are in MySpace and I really don't like MySpace anymore, but well, my friends are important to me, so I'm going to stay and stick it out just so that I can actually talk to them. Well, actually, you should be able to choose where you want to go, choose where you want to live, and that actually creates and incentivizes competition, so that if you do choose to leave MySpace, MySpace feels that. And so they'll actually hopefully improve their services and so forth. But that if you do choose to leave, you know, you can still call up your friend, you know, through the social network system and talk to them like you did before. DISO would not have been possible even 6 months ago. I think that's really important. We were able to, well, the communities involved in this stuff were able to get the OpenID 2.0 spec out in December, and the same day we got OAuth 1.0 out. And those are huge. Those are huge building blocks that have taken a long time to get the consensus around, to get the IP issues figured out, and to get to technology that people felt good about. So now that we have those two things, I mean, that changes the nature of the web and the way that we understand the web. There's also a growing sort of, I think, desire or interest in making things generally more open and transparent. And that large organizations, whether it's Facebook or Yahoo or Google or whomever, are actually really picking up, you know, the ball and saying, look, you know, we want to figure this stuff out.